Welcome to everybody. Thank you for coming to this second day of Alcantara Dialogue, the joint project with World Bank, Connect4Climate, and Alcantara. The panelists of today will deal with fashion and sustainability. Fashion is a huge industry, over $1 trillion industry, and on top of this, fashion has a very strong media power, and we believe that fashion could activate and promote and support a process of a growing demand of sustainability in the final consumer. So I'm very happy to be here, and now I give the microphone to Eliza Anyangwe.
Thank you. I've got one.
You have one.
I have one.
You don't need it.
Thanks everyone for coming. My name's Eliza, as you've now been told. I am a journalist at The Guardian newspaper in London. Before working at The Guardian on issues of global development, I used to work for an environmental NGO working with organic cotton farmers in West Africa. And while I was doing that, and actually before I was doing that as a university student, I started a social enterprise promoting ethical fashion in Liverpool, which is in the north of England. So I have had a very long interest in ethical fashion and in the fashion industry. What I was hoping the panel would discuss today is some of the contradictions between an industry that employs millions of people, that makes billions of dollars, and yet some of the costs that are also embedded in that system, in that supply chain. And I'm hoping that we will shed some light on what our panelists think is the way forward, how to reconcile the warming world, the changing world, as well as the design and aesthetics that fashion has to also those needs that it has to meet. But first, let me introduce our panel. So we still have a panelist to join us, and unfortunately one hasn't been able to be here today, but we will screen a video. So on the panel, starting at my left, is Franca Sozzani, who is the editor-in-chief of Vogue Italia. We have next to her Pietra Pistoletto, who is an independent designer who has been working using recycled materials since 1994 and is now based in Geneva. On her left is Francisco Costa, who is the head of the research lab at the accessories company Caprisa. And next to him is Martina Hauser, who is from the Ministry of Environment, Land and Science, and she is the head of Environmental and Carbon Footprint Task Force. So we are still waiting for Giovanna Melandri from Maxxi Foundation to join us, but there is enough to get started on. And I'm hoping that I can start with you, Franca, if each of my panelists can just take 3 or 4 minutes to set the stage for us. What does climate change mean to the fashion industry now? What does it mean to you? It should do.
Well, I think that fashion it's a special industry. It means that we cannot talk about ecological commitment, generally speaking, because we should say something that is not true. And I think that in a way we should be, if you wanted to face a problem, because it's a problem, we have even to start from the truth. We cannot say, fashion is the most committed. I think that fashion is very committed with sustainability. This is for sure, but in a social way. And this is something that I can really say, and I can be proud to be part of that, because I, not only personally, I don't want to talk about myself, I want even to talk about the fashion world. It's very committed in a social sustainability. The eco problem is a different story. I just can talk for Italy. It's people when I was just talking with Pietra, just coming here, when she started 20 years ago making something about ecological, it means recycling, people they didn't understand. after we found this word, vintage, and people love the word vintage because it meant something that has been already used, but it's very glamorous, it's very chic. But they don't care if it's recycled or it's ecological. But it's a good way to be dressed in a glamorous way, in a different way. So I think that only now we start to be really aware of what's happening to the climate, what's happening to the world. And many people in fashion, they're already doing and they're already working in this way. I mean, especially in the people that they are making fabrics. Because it's a long line, you know, to arrive at what we see on the runway. We started from the materials. If we don't start from the materials, and the materials themselves don't start from an ecological way, and which in the respect of the environment, what we see on the runway is not that important. It's what is important was started before. Otherwise, how you can make it? So I think it's a long line to convince from the beginning, and even, you know, now to convince people sometimes and to be, let's say, ethical, because ethical is a new word that everybody likes to use. You call ecological some cottons, for example, or some silk. They are not at all. And this is becomes even what's to learn, because I think that in the fashion world we have to teach, but we have to learn what really we are talking about, because otherwise it would be just a big misunderstanding.
Okay, that's a good starting place. I think lots to follow up there, so I hope everyone is starting to think of questions already. Pietra, would you please introduce yourself and the work that you do?
Hello. I'll speak about my experience. I'm a fashion designer, and I started in 1994, how they already told you. And for me, it was an incredible experience to think about recycling and transforming clothes when anybody was thinking about, even the bottles of plastic wasn't recycled. But I was thinking in those years, 20 years ago almost, that there was too much on the market, and I graduated as a fashion designer. It was not important that I was producing new things. So I started to transform, but in idea, just not as a college, but in idea of putting in relation ethic and sustainability, ethic and production. My works have always been very strange, very strong, but they started from the art way of showing things, so I had these new ideas. The fantastic thing, because many people say that in this day there is not enough, not so much in ethic and sustainability, but from the date that I started, I see many big changings. What I think is that fashion designers have a big responsibility in their work, because if they ask to the companies ethical, sustainable fabrics, the company needs to produce it. If they don't look for this, the company is not going to produce. They produce what the client wants. So I hope in the future that always more industries and companies, fabrics, and will think about ethic and aesthetic, because there is not ethic without aesthetic, and there is not aesthetic without ethic. And from this point, I think we have to continue on the work or start on the work.
Thank you very much. There's a late clapper there. I would just like to welcome Giovanna Melandri to our panel, who's just made it. She is the president of Maxxi Foundation. I think now that she has arrived, is a good time for us to show a video from Renzo Rosso, who could not be here today. And he has sent a message through, so I'm just going to make sure that that can go up. And then we will continue with the panel as we have them. So give Giovanna a moment to catch her breath. That's fine. Let's just see if the video will go up. Perfect.
Hi guys. Thanks for the invitation. Sorry for not to be there with you. I apologize. I have to be some of the mobile at this time. Thanks, Franca. Hi, Franca. Hope you're fine. Okay, let's talk about sustainability. Sustainability is something every company must be doing today because it is a part of a new, better social way to live for a new, better world. It's many ways, and also we are involved in different things. I'd like to talk today about my last initiative that I think are very beautiful. I went with Bono last January. I went in Africa. We decided to take a tour together. And we visit Uganda, we visit Mali. In Mali we do an incredible, we have an incredible village there. We built a village for 20,000 people. And very, very beautiful project, maybe we'll talk another time. And we went to Timbuktu to see the music festival. It was very great to see how the African people play music. And in Uganda, we saw the farmer. We saw so many people producing cottons. The way that they produce the cotton, the organic cotton, and what they doing after that for production and everything to gain money, to be alive. And we met many farmers, me, Bono and Dari. And I was very impressed in all this tour, not only in Uganda, I was impressed for how difficult for them is really to survive, because many people go in there, they squeezing the price, they losing the cotton, and we're thinking, what can we do? Because they asking help. You see these smiling people, African people, very sympathetic, and I think we must do something for them. So it's kind of about the idea, create jobs in Africa. This was the idea, so it was not a charity idea, it was just an idea how to create jobs in Africa, how to do a sustainability in this country, in this country. So we started from the bottom, then we bought all the cotton that they use, and we more than what they could in the next couple of years. And with this cotton, we do a cooperation between Edun, that is the Allium Bono line, clothing line, with diesel. We do a co-branding, and we create a little collection, very fashion, very beautiful, that we present already in the market last March. And everything is done in Africa. So from the cotton production, the fabrics, the cutting, the manufacturing, the washing, the trims, everything is made in Africa. And we have done more than this, because after also the promotion that we talk in Studio Africa, the promotion is done only with African people. So we bring the best bloggers, one of the best top models, photographers. So we bring famous African people, and all together we create this collection. It's 100% made in Africa. I think the result was fantastic, because we create jobs there. We give education to these people. I think a very important way to do sustainability to the poor country. This is something that I recommended a lot of other brands to do that, because it's a very modern way to give a real help to people to come out from the poverty. Hope you like the idea, you can be our promoter, and I wish you a nice day. Enjoy the rest of the day. Take care.
Not quite. I feel like Madonna. Oh, I'm back on now. To anyone who didn't actually hear that, can everyone hear me? Is that fine? Is that working? Yes. Okay. I think Renzo was generally talking about work that they're doing in Africa to do from basically field, from farm to fashion runway, building the capacity of poor people in a country by taking the entire supply chain to that country. We will continue with our panel, moving on to having Martina next, if that's okay. And Martina, if you could please, as our other panelists have done, tell us what this panel discussion means to you.
I work in the Ministry of the Environment of Italy. In particular, I come from the Department of Climate Change. So I am very committed, of course, to the climate change. But in the 2009, we decided, like ministry, to give a new service to the industry of Italy. So to make the calculation on the carbon footprint, water footprint, and the life cycle analysis, and to offer this to the Italian companies for free, because we wanted to try to create new methodologies, and we wanted to create even the transparency from the greenwashings on the products that we see around, from the supermarket to the fashion, to the cars, to the marketing that there is in the TV and so on. So what we are trying to do is to create an order in all this green story. So what we are doing, we are applying on the base of the international laws the carbon footprint and the water footprint of the products, not only in Italy, but also in another country and in developing country. After we will see the video of what we did in Brazil for one brand, and another video about the label that we created to give the transparency, the total transparency on the product. So when you are going to buy now one product, you will know the history of the product. You will know how much carbon you are consuming, how much land you are consuming, how much water, and especially you will know from where it's coming, that product, who is working behind that program, because we created a label that is including the social part. So we know exactly how many people is working, what type of the people, how much money they are receiving, if it's woman, what level of education, it's men, how many men are working, and what level of education they have. So I think this is a program that at least at the European level doesn't exist, that one state is doing. And now we have many requests to teach to the other states how to do this type of the job. So I'm very proud also because behind me there is a team of the young people. We have now 15 engineers that are from 26 years old, so just come out from the university. And in this very crisis moment, a very bad moment, to give a hope even to the young people, and especially from one ministry that, normally ministry is not very well seen, it's bureaucracy and so on. So this is my job. And I would like after to show you the video of the traces that we did in Brazil. So this is the first. You can see we are going to certify every single production in all parts of the world. So if you are producing organic cotton, we are going there to check and to certify that it is organic cotton, and how is transported organic cotton, and all the process, and from Utah, from all the prime material until at the end use of one single T-shirt. So
fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much.
We presented this in Rio Plus 20.
Okay.
We won also because he was the only one doing this. You can see here an example what we did in Brazil.
Thank you. So just watch the video quickly.
here are the plantations of Utah in Amazonia. So here, these are the workers that work inside of the plantation. From these plantations are coming out of the Utah, with who we are producing shoes, bags, all these materials. This is a type of the fish, is a prehistoric fish, and the population was using this fish just to eat the meat. They was throwing away the skin. And with this skin, now they are producing shoes and bags. Mrs. Obama is using one of that. We give her present. Yeah. So behind this, for example, there are 200 farmers that are working in this island, the Mexican island in the middle of the Amazonia. And today, thanks to these projects, we changed completely their life because we rebuilt completely their houses, all with the photovoltaic system. So their houses are working with the solar panels. Before they was using 80,000 tons of the diesel to make the farm working. So the farm today is working just with the... This is organic silk coming from the south of the Brazil. Under you can see we are working in 14 countries.
Yeah.
So we have more than 7,000 projects around the world. Oh, it's quite challenging. These are t-shirts made all with the organic cotton, painted with the organic color from Amazonia. This is the result of the bag from the pirarucu on the fish. Everything, yeah. This is all made in organic silk, for example. Why traces? You see, here is the cooperation between the Ministry of the Environment and the Brazilian government. So now we are building up all the skills, even for the Brazilians. So they will be able to carry on this alone in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. This is the important thing. This is the label.
Okay.
You can see.
That's okay.
This is the result. So the label that they give you the all informations about every single product.
The entire life cycle of the product.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you again. If you don't mind, Francesca, I'm going to save my only male panelist for last. And go next then to Giovanna Melandri, who is the president of the Maxxi Foundation. And Giovanna, given what you do, you come at this from a slightly different angle. So tell us what your views are on climate change and fashion and sustainability in the apparel industry.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. There we go.
Thank you again. Well, again, I think the great thing about these talks is that many things come to the same end. And I think that while we're talking today about sustainable fashion, about the capacity to unlock in a $1 trillion industry, its ecological potentials. What we're really talking about is also the social angle to this, the human angle to this. And my contribution today, very briefly, would like to underline this, that what we are talking about, and again, thank you to Alcantara and to the World Bank for this opportunity, is that we can really not untangle anymore sustainability under a social, ethical, and ecological angle. I know it's, you know, it looks quite obvious to say, but I think it isn't yet. And I think that the other thing I want to say is also reacting to what I just heard, is that it is great to see how even Italian institutions are doing a lot. Can I just appreciate publicly what I've just heard from the Italian Ministry of Environment? I mean, we are living in a country that is very good at sort of pushing ourselves down. And when there are great projects out there working all over the world, I think it's very important to acknowledge them. Said that, I want to give two examples of activities that I'm involved in. The first one, I mentioned it yesterday in a previous panel, with Maxxi. Maxxi is the National Museum, and actually the National Center for Contemporary Art and Architecture. And we're opening up to many more angles to contemporary expressions, such as design, photography, fashion. And what we really want to experiment in Maxxi more and more every day is to cooperate also with the fashion industry and the design industry in this country, and see how we can open areas of research for their sustainability, which is social, environmental, ethical, and aesthetical also. And we're doing this with Alcantara, and I hope we will be doing this over and over with many other industries and people working in this sector in Italy. The other thing I would like to mention, and it's a different angle, and I'm talking here not as president of Maxxi, but as president of a foundation called Human Foundation, which really wants to bring in this country the culture of social innovation and social finance. And what we are witnessing is a great lot, even in Italy. Now let me talk about Italy for a second, of social cooperatives, of social entrepreneurs that are working in this area. And let me mention one called Goel. This is a social entrepreneurship. It's a social cooperative working in Locride, which is an area very, come si dice, infiltrata, very exposed to criminal activities. And what they're doing, and this is a fashion, they're producing dresses. The industry is called Cangiari. And what they're doing is they're sort of rehabilitating and exploring the very old and antique and traditional lines of productions. And they're doing that with cooperatives, and they're giving work and employment to women, not only, that are exposed to mafia and to illegal systems. So there are many ways of looking at it. I think there's a way of looking at the great industries in the fashion business and asking them to be very careful in how the process is delivered and where their raw materials come from, etc. There's a way of looking at it under an ethical, very important ethical social angle. And here my view is that well, we need to have less aid policies and much more investment policies in developing countries. And then there is an angle that deals with our country. And I'm sure that there's a lot of social entrepreneurship that can be developed and meet these objectives in terms of ethical, environmental, and social outputs. I did want to mention a last thing, which comes from my biography. When I was youth minister in this country, I know it's not the issue today, but let me just mention it with one word. When I was youth minister in this country, I came to realize how incredibly devastating still is for young girls many of the aesthetical models that come out of fashion. There is the anorexia issue, and those are also ethical issues that come along with fashion. And if you look at it from a sort of distant perspective, and you see that the indexes that give us the idea when there is sottonutrizione, how do you say, bad nutrition, malnutrition, are the same indexes that in the fashion world are used to define anorexia. Well, then I think that's one issue that we have to look at. And I'm sure that a great industry can do a lot about that, about the models, about the aesthetic models. It has to do with the ethical models. They're not unlinked and untwinkled. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Okay. I think the final point you made, Giovanna, well, when you were talking about research, I think it's a very neat way of segueing into speaking right now to Francesco, because you are head of research at a luxury company, a luggage company, Caprisa.
Yes.
So if you could tell us then, we talked about clothes, we've talked about the policy angle. Tell us what climate change and fashion means for you.
Good evening to everyone. I follow Carpisa Lab, and I am an aeronautical engineer. In Carpisa Lab we have other 5 engineers, and we are involved in a new research with 2 big commitments. Ecological ideas, first one, and second one, innovative project. Then we have created a new luggage. This is the first one, the first project of our lab. In a new material, ecological, recycled PET. This is a luggage very strong, light, and low cost. This is only the first one of our some projects, always in innovative materials and innovative project. And then we are very involved in these new ecological ideas.
Thank you. Okay, so I think this is a good time to start some discussion. I thought it'd be good to start with an opening question to our panel, and then if we have any other questions that have come through from Twitter.
Can I say something?
Of course.
Yes. Just going back to Giovanna, when she said, about fashion and about ethical, that I agree completely, of course. But about girls, about models, I really have to underline one very important thing. We are all making a mistake. These girls are bad or malnutrition. It's not that the point. The point is that these girls are below 16.
Yes.
This is the main point. Now we have to, because this is the very ethical point. Because it's about nutrition. We know that the anorexia doesn't come from fashion, it comes from many other problems. And this could be the image too. But the main ethical problem is that when you use girls that are below 16, they're not still shaped. Mm-hmm. So it's not that not bad nutrition. They have no boots, they have no hips, they have nothing. Mm-hmm. So when they grown up and their bodies are shaping, they become like, they don't accept their body. Mm-hmm. They don't accept their new body to become a woman. And this comes the big problem. So the ethical is not to hire girls below 16 years. This is my opinion, and I think that we have to respect it, because and we have to tell to the agency, for example, we have a policy at Vogue that we should not hire girls below 16, and every month we have to answer to our president how old are each girl. Fantastic. And this is a way, at least, to say, you know, okay, of course, after some girls, they see beautiful models, they're tall, skin, okay, but you know, this is another point.
Well, I think related to what you have just said is what my first question is going to be about, which is the fact that the fashion industry, whether it is in publishing, so in magazines, whether it's in luxury goods, in accessories, what you sell is demand, right? A desire. And the pace at which we desire is much quicker than, you know, let's say during the Second World War, when people knew that they had to hold on to what they have for much longer. And so now we have a throwaway fashion industry because people desire much quicker. The magazines will give you a new trend every month or a new color. And so that pushes pressure down the supply chain to meet the demand for a product. How do you think your industry should change, or does it need to change? Do we need to become slower consumers? How do we? Let's start with the behavioral change question, because if fashion is selling demand, and you are meant to desire and want, what happens if we stop desiring? Who wants to go first?
I think that women will never stop desire. I mean, it's a dream when your dream is to love yourself.
There's clapping. The desirers are in this corner.
Once that you give up to desire, to be desired or to desire, it's the end of the life. And so I think that the woman will never give up. But this is not the point. I think it's the main point is because now with the big distribution, it makes like what now we call democratic fashion. And on my point of view, fashion will never be democratic because what we buy, it's a copy of what we wish to have. So the big distribution is giving the opportunity to everybody to afford something they always wish to have, they could never afford, and finally they can have a copy. So it's not democratic. It's like to give some desire and to say, okay, you cannot dream in a big scale, dream in a small scale. So it's not in this way, and I think that the more and more we produce, and more and less are expensive, and more you can afford, and of course you wanted to buy more and more and more, and so our production will become bigger instead of to make quality better. So it's another point that is difficult now to stop. It's like to say, you know, everybody has eaten until now, and tomorrow you say, no, now you stop to eat. I mean, there's no way. So now we have been in this rule, and we have to go on. But this will affect the bad side of fashion, because it doesn't give the quality. We are just quantity, and that's why it becomes a big problem.
Does anybody else have a point of view about how do we address the behavioral issues, the production cycle?
Can I try?
Please.
I agree with Franca. I mean, I don't think the entry point is discussing desire. I mean, that is that's part of the economic development in every sector, and you would never hear anybody from. I mean, personally. I don't even think that the answer, I mean, looking at it on a more broad approach, I would never think that the answer, even to our social and economic crisis of today, would be non-development. The issue is what kind of development, what quality of development. In fact, we are, in this moment, in a recession, and we are not growing. So we are already in a stagnant and not desire-oriented economy in a way, because consumption has stopped. Yeah. So is that the way out of it? I don't think. I think the way out of it is more difficult, which means looking at, well, we're talking about fashion today. This can be applied to many other areas. I think we're looking at two things. touching on Franca Sozzani's argument, we're looking at, we're looking at quality, we're looking at the whole chain, and we're looking at globalization. What are the effects of globalization on the increase of consumption and low-cost products? So to me, the crucial issue, if you want to look at from a sort of evolutionary side, is not to have these two approaches to product being more and more widened. That is, low cost, low quality, high cost, high quality. I think the issue is how do we keep quality in both areas, and how the keeping of the quality in both sectors, in fact, raises the quality also of the low-cost production. I think that is the issue. And if we look at that, well then okay.
No, can I say, I agree that it would be the best to have good quality and low cost, but it's impossible. I mean, we have to face the reality, because otherwise we just dream a world that we never have, because the quality is very expensive. The creativity is very expensive. The research is very expensive. When you have a low cost, because it's already made on the idea, on the creativity of someone else, yeah, so you don't have all this cost, and of course you could be plus that when I was last year, I was 1 month in Africa, I realized that the production is not fair trade sometimes. I don't want to accuse anyone, of course.
Franca, where were you in Africa?
I was in Ghana, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Uganda, Botswana, Burundi.
Great. I just think we should give some context.
So I really turn around.
Perfect.
And so I can really talk about that. And for many of this, it's not fair trade. So what does it mean? That of course you can hire people and will be very inexpensive. I mean, what's happening in Bangladesh? It's a disaster, you know. But this could happen every day, everywhere, because there is no control. There is no to have so low cost. You have to hire people who are desperate and to accept this kind of salary, that they are not salary. So it's a long story about that. So I think it's if we wanted to keep in the eco-sustainability, we have to say eco and sustainability, because at the moment, for me, are two different ways.
Do you think, and it'd be interesting to hear what Pietra has to say about this as a designer, but also having, working with cost. That's an important question. I find that designers, to factor in the cost of sustainability seems to be an addition to the cost of production. So if you had a transparent supply chain, if you had all of those things increase cost, where then, how do you cope with that as a designer? How do you cope with that when you're coming up with research ideas for new products? Where does the cost get absorbed, and how do we increase quality, and how do we factor in sustainability without necessarily increasing the cost at the consumer level? Does that make sense? Because if we're saying that there needs to be a low end of the spectrum, where with better quality, is that what we're saying? That the quality needs to be respected at both the high-end garments and both the low end. How do we do this? Is there a solution? Otherwise, I mean, does it start with the thinking about design? Where do we factor in those costs? Pietra, do you have any?
Fashion designer want to spend less possible.
Okay.
So if the fabric is not sustainable, but it costs less, they choose the not sustainable fabric. So it's difficult for the company produce expensive fabric if the fashion designer don't ask it. Mm-hmm. So it's very complicated because there is not demand, there's not production. So the company says if I had demand, I will produce kilometers. And the fashion designer says in his way, he cannot ask kilometers of fabric if it costs so much. So maybe you should add the fashion designer and the company to promote this, how the like the panel, no, with the Sistema Solare, there are incentives.
Yeah.
Maybe also in this way, incentive with companies to produce eco-sustainable fabrics. So the fashion design, they will use it.
Yeah.
Important is that the fabric is at the same level of the other, because you not choose a sustainable ethic fabric if it's not the best fabric. If you want to make a jacket, something, you want to make it the best. So, because the consumer is going to choose not because it's sustainable. They choose what they like. But the clothes that is sustainable, it should be the same way of not sustainable. It should be a normal thing.
I think that was the point I was...
Can I touch on that?
Sure,
I mean,
please do.
and on the both arguments. Okay, what we're talking about are general regulations. So if we talk about fair trade, or if we talk about incentives, what we're talking about is national and international bylaws and regulations. We don't need to put that on the consumer. We don't need to put that on the producer. I mean, if you are if you're using children for labor, or if you are using polluted water, or if you produce polluted water, or if you're polluting the soil for textile, that has nothing to do with the end pipeline of the consumer. That has to do, so maybe didn't express myself clearly before, and I want to be clear on that. That has nothing to do with, it has to do with regulations, national, international bylaws. And that is what institutions are there for, and what I was meaning about the quality and the high quality and the mass market is said that there should be, if we want to unlock the innovative capacity, as we're talking about this great industry, we have to look at the international regulation. And I think it's very important that the World Bank is hosting this this talk. It's not something that can be done on a national level, not only on a national level. On top of that, I think, it's not my, I'm not an expert in that, but I sort of feel that there can be, on a embedding quality, even in products that are not luxury products, and that is maybe the challenge that is a challenge for producers and for the industry, and also for the awareness of consumers. But that's on top of it. It's on top of the regulation.
If we're talking then about regulation, then Martina, you were saying the services that you offered were for free to businesses here. That seems more of an enabling role than a legislative role. Should government go straight to passing laws, or should they find other ways to try and encourage fashion business to be more sustainable?
Today in Italy we are carrying on 100 projects in 100 industry in different sectors, because I'm not working only in the fashion, but of course in all sectors in Italy. And we are setting up the methodologies in different sectors, because it didn't exist before. So after that we will set up the methodology in the different sectors, and this will last for sure another years, because can you imagine, for all products is a very huge job. We will negotiate with another member state, because we are in Europe, and at the end we will find a way or harmonize what we are doing, what France is doing, what Germany is doing in the same field, even if they are not so committed like Italy. At the end we will have a regulation that will regulate the different sectors in the carbon footprint, water footprint, and life cycle analysis. This for sure. But the industry with whom I'm working today, they are working on the voluntary basis. So what we are offering is not that we are imposing to the industry, but they want this. So they come to us, they sign an agreement on a voluntary basis, and we send our engineers, our people, to do this job for them. So the things are changing. So this I'm saying. What I'm not an expert in fashion, but for what I see in India or in Brazil, the regulations in this country are becoming very strict in the field of the fashion, especially in the textile industry. For example, now there is the new regulation in India where the textile industry in the process cannot throw away anymore even 1 liter of water. So the water that is entering in the process has to be recycled, cleaning, and so on, and reused. So this is something that started 6 months ago. Of course, it will take time to change all the chain, all the production that are around the world, but are sign that something is moving, at least is moving. So let's hope. What can I say? Just this. Of course, this doesn't have to touch the freedom of the people to choose one thing instead of another thing. This, for me, is very important. But even the consumer, from my point of view, must to have the freedom to read and to know what is behind of the product he is buying. So, this is the point.
I still don't think we've touched really on how to make the fashion industry more traceable. I think you will find a lot of designers in any single t-shirt, the cotton might come from several different countries. And I think it is fair for a designer to say, we don't know where the cotton in our garment comes from, so how can we know what conditions it was grown in? Or the fashion industry is a very complex industry with any specific garment has a very long supply chain. I wonder if maybe Francesco, in your industry, if anyone can tell me or share ideas of how do we do this? How do we make the supply chain more transparent? How do we bring traceability into fashion? And the consumers, communicating with the consumers. I don't think many consumers don't desire it because they do not know the cost of their garments, right? We talk a lot more about the cost of eating non-organic food or whatever, but we don't really talk about the cost of wearing a t-shirt that may have been grown with pesticides. So do we think enough is being done to improve traceability? Do we think enough is being done to communicate the connection between fashion and sustainability? Francesco, have you got views?
Our experience is this Carpisa has a product low cost in Italy. Okay. And then we think very well, we know very well that our big problem is quality. Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, the solution of this problem, real solution, is research. This is the big problem. Because I agree with Franca, research is very expensive. Mm-hmm. Then this is the solution of this problem.
So do you think there needs to be more legislation then? Should government get involved? Would that help? Should government subsidize research, for example, into sustainable textiles and fashion?
In my opinion, we have to study some other products, not only ecological ideas, but in my opinion are also innovative material, innovative project. This is the difference with the other product that we have in Italy and in the world. Ecological ideas and innovative products and material.
Mm-hmm. Would anyone like to, Martina?
T-shirt. My job started with one T-shirt in Brazil. So after that we calculated all the carbon footprint of that T-shirt, organic T-shirt. We compared that carbon footprint with the T-shirt of the different countries. And more or less, the carbon footprint was same for that type of the T-shirt. So this means that from cultivations to the fabrics at the end, the type of the chain was same. But the point it is who was committed to change. Because in the moment that you know, you say, okay, now what I do to change my, for example, carbon footprint or water footprint. So that is the point. In the moment that you know what are you doing to change and to reduce your carbon footprint and your water footprint in the chain of the industry. That is the new mechanism. Another way is doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
You know, but
Can I ask you how, how useful you find labeling in the industry? So, for example, to label something fair trade or to label it organic, where is the value? Is the value in you being in being able to add a margin? Do we think that the consumer understands the value of the label? Do we think there's enough trust? And with more and more labels, if each company starts its own label, does it cause more confusion than it does help consumers understand? What do we think about labeling? Anybody have any thoughts? No comment on labeling.
No, very important. I'm working to make the labeling.
Yeah, so maybe you shouldn't answer.
No, I think it's always about people. Today it's about people. It's not about label. In the label, you can, of course, when it's like they are committed, they for sure will be safe. But people they just trust other people. If you have a big name, it's a big brand. You are already think that it's a synonymous of quality, of research, of everything. So now it's you that you have the big label to be ethic in all the step of your production. It's not about a label. People, they just trust the name because the name, it's not if you see ecological, sustainable. I mean, most of the people, if you go and you write you ask, they don't even know what you're talking about. They just wanted to buy a T-shirt and they pay as less as they can. Yeah. So it's you that you have to do and to teach people. People cannot learn from you.
So why don't we do more of this? Why doesn't the fashion industry do more teaching? Whose role is it to, because magazines will enlighten people about what the season's latest trends are in colors. Why don't we talk more consistently about some of the challenges in creating sustainable clothing?
Because we need specialized people who knows many things about sustainability and goes and speak about, but they should know how is the production, everything. We need really also in the schools, they don't know absolutely. They make all kind of material. They make sewing, drawings, they don't make nothing about sustainability. They don't know nothing. It's starting now, but we need people who knows, specialized people who goes and speak about, because there are many people who wants to know.
What I find is that many important industries, brands, do a lot of research, and they have great investments in doing this. Maybe it's not totally spilled over into the communication. I think there is a communication issue here, not as much as the communication of the fashion magazines, but as much as the communication of the brands. Where are they today? Where is the and also I think there is a general cultural issue. When you were mentioning before the food industry, in the food industry we seem to be much more aware of, there is a general tendency of being much more aware of what you eat and asking for high quality food, and that kind of culture is slowly but sort of generally probably not as much as knowing if a textile is produced with an environmental outcome or with a pollution outcome. So I think there is an issue of there's a cultural and research in this issue, but there's also a communication issue. Maybe that's a good point where we could work. I mean, I was thinking now, sort of to myself, how could an institution like Center for Contemporary Art work on that? Maybe we could try and start putting together, you know, the great schools we have, the fashion schools, the great designers, and the people who are working on sustainability. I mean, just as we're doing now here, no? And have them talk, because sometimes it's, you know, they're worlds far away and far separated. Well, I offer Maxxi to do that. Maybe we can do that. Maybe we can put together around tables, and together with the Ministry of Environment, maybe we can do that.
Fantastic.
And in Italy, I think this would be an important starting point.
Yeah. I think
Let's try.
From my experience of working for an environmental NGO, I was sat on a board of a steering committee with high street retailers in London, talking about. I was very naive and very hopeful, and I said, why don't we have a Wear Organic Week, where you change your window displays, and because everybody's doing something quietly, and why don't you tell your consumers in 1 week as you would promote anything else that you're doing that you're excited about? And I found that fashion retailers are very nervous in talking very boldly about what they're doing in sustainability in fashion, because invariably it means that the media and the consumer in their minds will ask them, well, if 10% of your clothes are organic or sustainable and fairly traded, what about the other 90? And is the fashion industry ready for this kind of open communication? Because when you start a conversation, it only brings on more questions. I think I think it's great to be bold enough to start that dialogue, so I commend you for wanting to start that dialogue, but I think it's a process that needs to be open and to be started. I'm aware that we have an audience, and then and there's a roaming mic, I understand, or there might be, so I wondered if there were any questions or comments from the people who are sat or standing on the other side of the panel. Any questions from the audience at all?
Can I say something
Please.
about media?
Yeah.
Because this is, I feel that I can talk about media. It's people, they read and they read the most stupid things, because this is the truth, because how more stupid is a magazine, the more you sell. And as far as you really go inside, deep inside in an idea, because you want to give a message, people, they don't do. I just give an example. Now we did this eco-sustainable issue with Bloomberg on the cover, and with a lot of interviewing people are committed with environment, with everything. I'm really curious to see what people they react. Just to give you an example, when we did, when I was on the runway, I was looking at the runway in the show, and I realized at a certain moment a few years ago there was no black girls. Only one, Naomi, but she was not anymore on the runway. So the only girl that I was looking at the time was Lia Kebede, and said, oh, she's so beautiful, she's so classy. And so I made an entire issue about the black girls, only black girls. In Italy, we didn't sell one single more copy. Not one more than the month before.
Sold out in London.
And sold out in London, in America, and in Germany. And what we sold later is because Obama became president. So, no, but it's one. No, if we do one less, we don't even give any more to do. Lower than this, in this moment, we cannot be. So.
Did you get any feedback from your regular readers in Italy about what they thought of the campaign to run an issue with only black models? Did people write in?
No, they don't have a reaction. Don't even at the newspaper. Anyone. I've had New York Times. I've had all the Washington Post. I've had all the magazine in America, in England, in Germany. No one has made something like that in Italy. So it's not because Italy is different from any other country, because probably they think that it's not our problem. You know. So it's not where we live daily. And now I tried, and I did this eco-sustainable issue. I'm really curious to see what will happen, because I did, because I believe, I trust, and I think, as Giovanna was saying, we have to try. We have to give a message. We have to do. And I did. But I'm sure that will not happen anything. No, but I'm very
Everyone,
honest.
please go out and buy copies of Vogue.
At least I know my limit and I want to try. But I know that it's very difficult.
Yeah.
If you do a magazine about TV starlet, they're buying like crazy. It's the point. By the way, I have to go.
That's fantastic. So we should wrap up. What is that? Everyone has to leave in a minute. It's okay. I was wondering if you could, because given the, if I could hold you for just one more second, because we have a commitment to answer at least one question from people who tweet them in. If that's okay, I'll whiz you a quick question, and with your answers to that, if you could just wrap up if you don't have an answer, and then we'll close up the discussion. I think it's always useful for. We've dealt with so many issues. If someone can, say what their hope is, something positive that they're concluding on, so that leaves us action points. The one question I'm going to ask is, it's quite a technical question. So, how do we change the endpoint? How do we change? The question is, how do we change? Well, we've already talked about the life cycle. How can designers mitigate emissions and localize production without the loss of revenue? And if somebody would like to take that question on, and then if I can ask each of my panelists to just please sum up with their views on a way forward. Who would like to take on the question of mitigating emissions? No one? How do you deal with carbon emissions, and how do you localize production, given that we're talking about a globalized industry? How do we bring production back to the local level?
Personally, we just did with this issue of eco-sustainability, we bought carbon neutral credits. So this is because what do you want to say? That we make recycle paper? Never, because it's not for Vogue. I mean, it's not the kind of paper that we can use, even if it's a very good paper, and there is a kind of a paper that we can even use. We have to use ink. We have to print. I mean, it's at the moment it's such a long. How can I say? It's a long way to could change. The paper, the ink, the kind of printing. So it's not that it's a solution probably, but already buying a carbon neutral credit, it's already a step.
Okay. If I can close the conversation there, it's been brilliant to have you all, to hear your insights. Thank you so much for making the time. Thanks to our panel. Oh, that's